It says that Leticia James's office was thrilled when Matthew Colangelo was hired by Alvin Bragg. Weird.
Started out as a civil rights lawyer, then became a federal prosecutor, ultimately was the #2 lawyer in the New York State Attorney General's office, leading the charge against the racist policies of the Trump administration.
Okay.
In and of itself, that may not be enough to secure a reversal of the conviction, but there is a concept in appellate law, cumulative error. And what I believe we've seen in the Trump trial is a series of errors, one piled upon the other.
Biden's prosecutor, Matthew Colangelo, was a little bit closer to Joe Biden than they let on. We know that he left Joe Biden as the DOJ's #3, went to work for Bragg to prosecute Trump. But it turns out Colangelo was very closely connected with Jeffrey Zients, the guy who is now the chief of staff for Joe Biden. So Joe Biden's DOJ knew Joe Biden's chief of staff, was sent over to Bragg's office to prosecute Trump, and Colangelo is going after Biden's opponent. Jeffrey Zients, of course, would be very happy if Trump was taken out. And how do we know all of this? Well, it turns out the Judiciary Committee got their hands on some documents, and here is what it looks like. Jim Jordan posted this. He says, "We got this new document from the Judiciary GOP. They're investigating all of this collusion between all of the weaponizers." Says, when Matthew Colangelo applied to work for Leticia James, remember her? Guess who he listed as his references? So he went to go work. Remember, this guy started working for Obama. Then he went and worked for Leticia, prosecuted Trump in the civil division that led to a lot of Trump's business problems there. He owes about $500 million. That's not good. Led all of that, then left Tish's office, went to go work for Joe Biden. Many people speculate that he helped to instigate the various prosecutions that were launched in DC and launched in Florida, and then left there from the DOJ's #3, and then went over to Bragg's office to prosecute Trump there. The only cases that has ultimately gone to trial. So before he landed at Bragg's office, here's what he told Tish. He knew the DNC chair, Tom Perez, says, "Oh, great. So another Democrat will tell you that I'm incredible." The DNC chair was a pretty big endorsement. And now it's Biden's White House chief of staff, Jeff Zients. So here is the list of professional references. This is from Matthew Colangelo. He's applying, filling out his form and his paperwork. It's just a formality at this point. We all know what he's there for. For Executive Deputy Attorney General, the Division of Social Justice. And Leticia was enabling him to go after Trump. So who does he reference? These are his professional references. Just call these people. They'll vouch for me. 1, Tom Perez, Chairman, DNC, former Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights. Yeah, that's how it works. So they just go to these Democratic-run institutions, and then when they leave there, they go from Democrat bureaucracy to another Democrat bureaucracy, and they're just basically built to preserve each other. The DOJ preserves the DNC preserves the DOJ. Make sure that everybody who leaves the DOJ has a nice fat landing spot at the DNC and vice versa. So then Colangelo is just a hitman. He's just a prosecutorial hitman for these two guys, and he lives there. So similarly, Colangelo says, "Tom was my direct supervisor for 6 years. I was Deputy Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights and counsel to the Acting Associate AG at the U.S. Department of Justice from 2010 to 2013. Those were the Obama years. And Chief of Staff at the U.S. Department of Labor from 2013 to 2016. Okay, so he's in the government that entire time, one bureaucracy to another. Then he also references Jeffrey Zients, now Biden's White House Chief of Staff. Now, he wasn't there at the time when he was being referenced here, but he says that I'm referencing him. He's the president of the Cranemere Group, former director, White House National Economic Council, and assistant to the president for economic policy for a bunch of years. Jeff was my direct supervisor for a year in my role as deputy director of the National Economic Council and deputy assistant to the president for economic policy. Very interesting. So the disgusting incestuous relationship continues on. Jeff Zients endorsed him to go to Tish's office, then brought him back probably, right? He's been hanging around with Joe Biden for years, and it's just a nice little thing. Now, you'll notice that as part of these hiring documents, the Judiciary Committee also dropped this. Very interesting here. Here's a new document that was obtained by the Judiciary Committee. It says that Leticia James's office was thrilled when Matthew Colangelo was hired by Alvin Bragg. So we follow the bouncing ball from Obama to Tish to Biden to Bragg. Somebody sends an email. Matthew Colangelo gets a new nameplate at Bragg's office. Weird. Here's what the email says. To James Sheehan from Matthew Colangelo. Sent Friday, December 16, 2022, 9:53 in the morning, Eastern Standard Time. Here's the subject. And a couple emails went back and forth. And it says, from Jim to Matthew, congratulations on your new role. One prosecutor to another. Here's the link. It says, Matthew, glad to see you are back in New York City. Sounds like you and Mr. Trump's paths will continue to intersect. Isn't that interesting? Will continue to intersect. What a strange coincidence. Now, I wanted to reach out to you for contact about your old office about the attached Lisa Monaco memo regarding a review of the department's approach to instances of misconduct by Federal Bureau of Prisons employees in the report. My Google search shows that the report was posted, but then it was taken down. We're looking at best practices to deal with misconduct from our own prison officials, handling abuse, by the Catholic Diocese in New York too. Enjoy your new role. Oh, he will. Yeah, this is his entire reason for existing, is to prosecute Trump. That's why he's there. So it's very strange that their paths will continue to intersect, right? Everybody knows what this job is. Everybody knows what he's doing. And so he responds, Colangelo says, hey, good to hear from you, Jim. For questions about the Bureau of Prisons, maybe call Betsy. She's not the right person. She should help you out. Hope you're well, Matthew. So James Sheehan welcoming him and saying, you've done a great job. We can't wait to have you back. We know you're going to enjoy this. See you in court. Colangelo comes back to finish the job. So the connection is there. We always know that this stuff is political. Here is the latest ad, or the video that assembles the ads from Alvin Bragg's campaign, is now being shared by the Judiciary Committee. So they went through, they assembled all the statements of him, and they created this montage. Here's what it sounds like.
Whoever has this job, are they going to convict Donald Trump?
That is the number one issue. I'm the candidate in the race who has the experience with Donald Trump. We sued the Trump administration over 100 times. I sued Trump over 100 times and brought a case against the Trump Foundation and held him accountable. Holding Trump accountable for the Trump Foundation.
From exposing illegal behavior by the Trump Foundation.
I do have a lot of experience with the former president. I led the New York State Attorney General's work and investigation and successful litigation against him and his family for their misconduct with the Trump Foundation. And also we had a number of litigations, more than 100, involving the Trump administration. I led the team that held Trump and his children accountable for their misconduct with the Trump Foundation. I oversaw the work which sued his administration more than 100 times. I led the Attorney General's work on the Trump Foundation case, where we held Trump and his family accountable. When I was at the Attorney General's office, I led our work on the Trump Foundation matter. I also led the team that did the Trump Foundation case, and I've seen him up front and seen the lawlessness that he can do. Started out as a civil rights lawyer, then became a federal prosecutor, ultimately was the #2 lawyer in the New York State Attorney General's office, leading the charge against the racist policies of the Trump administration.
Okay.
I believe we have to hold him accountable. I've litigated with him, and so I'm prepared to go where the facts take me once I see them and hold him accountable. Being a rich old white man has allowed you to evade accountability in Manhattan. That includes Trump and his children, right? We held him accountable in the Trump Foundation case. My office did the Trump University case. So I've seen a pattern of lawlessness over 20 years, and so I'm inclined to believe all I see in the public domain and believe that there's a path forward there to make a case.
Prosecuting in the interest of justice. That's Alvin Bragg, the prosecutor, Manhattan DA, who's run and campaigned on prosecuting Trump and delivered, actually did what he said he was going to do. New York seemingly is not having a good time with their crime problem, but at least they got their political opponent under their scrutiny. Now, the Judiciary Committee and Congress have released this report, and it's a doozy. There's a lot to unpack here, and so let's see what is inside. From the Committee on the Judiciary and the Select Subcommittee on Weaponization of the Federal Government from the U.S. House of Representatives, you see this nice report, a 35-pager dropped entitled Lawfare, How the Manhattan DA's Office Bragg Colangelo at the behest of the Bidens and a New York State judge called Juan Merchan violated the constitutional and legal rights of President Trump. Let's see what's inside. Here's the executive summary. On April 4th, 2023, Alvin Bragg, so over a year ago, announced that he secured a 34-count indictment against Trump. Now, it was an insane case. It was a bootstrapped misdemeanor state charge that allegedly said that Trump falsified some business records. We know that this was involving Cohen and Stormy Daniels. One scholar explained that even if these alleged bookkeeping irregularities amounted to crimes, they couldn't have had the slightest impact in 2016, and they were trying to make this an election interference case. So in March of 2023, the Judiciary Committee opened up an investigation. They wanted to know more about this. They dug into this guy, former Manhattan Special Assistant DA Mark Pomerantz. This was the guy who resigned and threw his own hissy fit because Bragg won the election and decided he wasn't going to prosecute. They sent a subpoena to him, litigated about this, and despite his conduct at the deposition, he didn't answer any questions, right? Pomerantz came in, they dragged his butt into Congress, and then he just sat there. I invoked the fifth. Really? You're a prosecutor, Mark. But regardless of his stonewalling, the investigation did prove fruitful. fruitful. On April 25th, the committee released its findings, and in short, Bragg's prosecution of Trump was politically motivated, obviously. It was unethical, and it was likely unlawfully focused on one person. Anyone would think it was widely perceived as being politically motivated. The Judiciary Committee held a hearing highlighting the weaponization of all of this. During testimony, former federal prosecutor called James Trusty said, "This is the antithesis of justice. This is an ends justify the means mentality." And Robert Costello, Michael Cohen's former attorney, also came out and explained what a rigged prosecution this whole thing was. Costello, as we know, came in and said, "I couldn't even talk about anything. The judge cut me off." Costello was looking up at the judge like this. "What?" And the judge said, "What are you doing looking at me like that?" And he said, "Wow, this is crazy." On June 13th, the full committee on the judiciary convened a hearing, and the committee heard testimony about how badly this case was. The FEC Commissioner James Traynor explained how Bragg's prosecution was a significant deviation from the legal framework that's already been established by federal authorities. The committee also heard from a constitutional scholar called Elizabeth, who explained in detail how the trial violated Trump's rights. And Andrew Bailey, shout out from Missouri, said it was clearly politically motivated. Now, we know a fundamental principle of American justice is that no individual is above the law. And you know the rule on this. Anybody who says that, we have to deduct 20 IQ points. Sorry, it applies to everybody. But just as important is the precept, is that prosecutors prosecute conduct, not individuals. Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg, however, ran for office on a platform of investigating and prosecuting Trump, bragging about his extensive experience suing President Trump. And he did that. We just listened to the clip. But the same prosecutor, Mark Pomerantz, after Alvin Bragg said he was not going to prosecute charges, Mark Pomerantz threw a hissy fit. And then he leaked a resignation letter. And he attacked Alvin Bragg. He said, "You're a little too soft, buddy boy. You're a little too marshmallowy over there, all right? Being a little too soft, a little too timid." That same prosecutor, Mark Pomerantz, they wrote a book about it and was all over the media. And the book premiered after Trump declared his candidacy. And so Pomerantz then told everything. So we have a lot of problems here. This report explains all the different ways that Bragg's prosecution was terrible. These infirmities include, but are not limited to, Bragg's unconstitutional and unprecedented, they have a graphic on this, Russian nesting doll theory of criminal liability. Remember those little Russian dolls where you just open them up and there's another one inside, you open that up, and another one's all the way down to the little itty bitty one, super cool and cute. Never had to reach unanimity. Says that you could just tuck them in there and the jurors didn't even have to be unanimous on any of the elements that were inside. Also, Bragg usurped the federal government, right? They investigated this. They declined to do anything about it. And Judge Juan Merchan is a biased and partisan piece of crap. Says, here's what's going on. They didn't write that. Says, egregious legal rulings before and during the trial all cut against Trump. Here's what the judge did. He failed to recuse himself. He has political bias. He donated to Biden twice, and his daughter works for Joe. The unconstitutional gag order he imposed on Trump violated his First Amendment rights and our First Amendment rights. Judge Merchan's admission of plainly admissible, irrelevant, and unfairly prejudicial testimony against Trump, everything that Stormy Daniels was coming out, talking about all the gratuitous stuff that never happened, which was clearly meant to prejudice the jurors, and Judge Merchan's refusal to allow Bradley Smith, the FEC guy, to come in and testify. He just said, well, you know, the jury can think about whatever they want, that rule says. So in other words, the jury could apply a federal law to a state level crime because the judge just allowed it. Court doesn't have any jurisdiction over that, but it could be another crime for the purposes of this case. They say, look, President Trump never had a fair shot in Manhattan, obviously. In a more neutral jurisdiction where a politically ambitious prosecutor was not motivated by partisanship, Trump would have never been found guilty. The case would have never been charged if you had an honest person behind it. But we didn't. We had a whole cabal of dishonest people, including Colangelo. Says, but Manhattan is anything but a neutral jurisdiction. Trump promised to appeal, stating, we're going to fight for our Constitution. And this is far from over. But the Democrats' use of lawfare accomplished its short-term goal. It removed Trump from the campaign trail, diverted attention away from Biden and his missteps and policies. And since Alvin Bragg announced last year his political prosecution of Trump, the committee and the select subcommittee have conducted oversight of these prosecutions, and the state and local prosecution by popularly elected prosecutors raises serious concerns. And while Bragg and congressional Democrats dismiss these concerns, the committee has taken steps to assure that certain federal officials have a more neutral venue. Now, our work is not done here, but this interim report shows how Trump had his constitutional and his legal rights absolutely violated, and we have covered this many times. It was bad law, it was a bad jurisdiction, it was a bad judge, it was a group of bad prosecutors. The whole thing was rigged from top to bottom, through and through. And so the committee is continuing to investigate this, and we're glad they released this report, but we're much much looking forward to this new hearing, which hopefully happens. They were supposed to be scheduled for a hearing on the 12th, July 12th, with Alvin Bragg and Colangelo themselves to come in and testify, but they're not going to be doing that. According to a source now, that has been postponed. Oh no, wonder why. Now a new hearing date is TBD, so that has not come about yet, but they did have a hearing today where they brought in some other individuals to comment on the rigged trial, and this is one exchange that took place here. We have Harriet Hageman, a representative from Wyoming, is asking some questions on this. Here's what one sounded like.
What the standard of review is for that kind of error, and sometimes if it's abuse of discretion, courts give trial judges a lot of leeway, but it doesn't mean that the decision wasn't right, wasn't wrong.
Judge Wilson, do you believe that Judge Merchan committed reversible error in excluding Mr. Smith but allowing Mr. Cohen to testify on these issues?
In and of itself, that may not be enough to secure a reversal of the conviction, but there is a concept in appellate law, a cumulative error. And what I believe we've seen in the Trump trial is a series of errors, one piled upon the other, cumulative errors that when you put them all together show that Donald Trump did not have a fair trial and that his conviction should be reversed.
I'm absolutely convinced that his conviction will be reversed. And I also believe that Judge Merchan was well aware of that when he made the decisions during the course of trial that he did. I found his decisions to be egregious reversible error on so many different levels. Thank you all for being here today. And with that,
Yeah, and that's in addition to all of the other things that are happening, one of which, of course, is the immunity problem that they have just run into. So not only did we have bad prosecutors, bad judges who had daughters working for Joe, who made donations to Joe, who showed up on podcasts scolding Trump for posting on Twitter and stuff like that. Daughter was talking about that in podcasts. The list goes on, but they also brought in a ton of official act evidence in the trial. Michael Cohen got checks in 2017. Trump was the president. So the checks literally were signed while Trump was the president. Now you might say those are personal checks. Maybe those are not official checks, but we don't know. We never had a hearing to make that determination, and the Supreme Court said you got to do that. We're going to continue to cover it, and we're looking forward to hearing Colangelo and Bragg testify. We hope you join us as we do. If you want to be sure you don't miss it, thank you for subscribing. That's a great way to stick around and make sure that you see what's happening here, because that will be happening hopefully at some point soon, and we'll look forward to covering it and more back here on the next one.